The man sleeping with my wife owned half my company. I didn't discover it through a confession or a message that popped up at the wrong time. I discovered it through the quiet realization that I had become unnecessary in my own life. Not irrelevant, just optional. At work I still mattered. Meetings waited for me. Decisions carried my name. My signature still meant something. At home, things had already started happening without me. My wife stopped waiting up. She didn't say it outright, didn't accuse me of anything. She simply adjusted. Dinner happened whether I was there or not. Conversations ended without saving the important parts. When I apologized for working late, she smiled and said, "I know. You're building something." She said it like reassurance. I heard it like permission. My business partner, Caleb, was someone I trusted without question. We'd built the company together from nothing. Long nights, shared risk, equal ownership. When we signed the papers that split the company 50-50, it felt like a vow. He looked me in the eye and said, "We do this clean, no games." I believed him. When my wife met him, she liked him immediately. She said he was steady, reliable, safe. He came to dinners, brought wine, asked thoughtful questions, laughed easily. He fit into our life with an ease that felt earned. That should have reassured me. Instead, something shifted. The first moment I noticed wasn't dramatic. It was a meeting. My wife stopped by the office to drop off paperwork I'd forgotten at home. She kissed my cheek, smiled at me, then stayed standing near Caleb's desk. They talked about nothing important, weekend plans, a mutual friend, a restaurant. But the conversation flowed too easily. When she touched his arm, it lingered just long enough to feel intentional. When I looked at them, they adjusted. That word would come back to me later. At home, my wife grew calmer, not happier, settled. Like something in her had found balance elsewhere. She asked about my day out of habit, not interest. She no longer waited to talk to me. When I got home, the emotional part of her day already felt finished. Caleb started telling me to go home early. "You've been grinding," he'd say. "I'll handle the rest." It sounded supportive. It felt strategic. I went home early twice. Both times my wife wasn't there. "Errands," she said. "Lost track of time." She never used to lose track of time. I started noticing details I didn't want to notice. A second coffee mug in the sink. Her perfume faintly lingering in my car when she said she hadn't been in it. Her sudden interest in company schedules. Asking when Caleb would be in, whether he'd be at certain meetings. One night, she casually asked, "Is Caleb coming to the client dinner next week?" "Probably," I said. "Why?" She shrugged too quickly. "Just wondering." The first time I felt something hard settle in my chest was when I came home and found company documents on the counter, highlighted, annotated. She said she wanted to understand the business better. "I talked to Caleb," she added. "He explained everything. He's really good at making it make sense." I didn't respond right away. The way she said his name felt practiced. The moment everything cracked open came from a mistake. Mine. A meeting got canceled. I left work early without telling anyone. I wanted to surprise her. Something normal. Something good. When I pulled into the driveway, the house felt occupied in a way that didn't include me. Voices came from the kitchen. Low, relaxed, familiar. When I stepped inside, I saw them. Not touching, not scrambling. My wife leaned against the counter. Caleb standing too close, his head angled toward her like he belonged there. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. When they noticed me, they didn't jump apart. They adjusted. "Oh," she said, "you're home early." Caleb laughed lightly. "We were just talking through some company stuff." Company stuff. I looked at him. He didn't look surprised. He looked interrupted, like this wasn't the first time. That's when I understood. This wasn't flirting. This wasn't a mistake. This was access. He owned half my company. He had half my day, half my trust. And now he had my wife. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions. I just felt the floor shift under the life I thought I understood. Because if the man sleeping with my wife owned half my company, then whatever came next wouldn't just cost me a marriage. It could cost me everything. Act 2, Escalation. I'll fight 900 eyes, 300 characters. After that afternoon, I didn't confront either of them. That surprised me too. Not because I wasn't angry, I was, but because anger felt useless. Confrontation would give them a chance to rush ahead of the truth, to shape it, soften it, explain it into something survivable. I wasn't ready to let them do that. So I did the opposite. I acted like nothing had changed. The next morning I left for work at the same time, kissed my wife on the cheek, told her I had a full day of meetings. She smiled back, relief flickering across her face so quickly she probably didn't realize she'd revealed anything at all. At the office, Caleb greeted me like always, friendly, focused, professional. If there was guilt, it didn't show on the surface. That was the most unsettling part, how comfortable he seemed. Not reckless, not nervous. Comfortable like someone who believed the situation was contained. I started paying attention. Not emotionally, logistically. Caleb's calendar shifted around mine with a precision I hadn't noticed before. Meetings he insisted I attend were scheduled early. The ones he told me to skip landed late. On days I stayed late, he left earlier. On days I went home early, he lingered. At home, my wife's rhythm matched his. She stopped asking about my schedule, but she always seemed to know it. Errands appeared on the days I worked late. Silence filled the afternoons when I wasn't around. When I texted her during the day, replies came slower, shorter, like her attention was already allocated elsewhere. The intimacy between us didn't disappear. It changed. She touched me more often, but it felt performative, like maintenance. She laughed at my jokes again, cooked my favorite meals, asked questions she already knew the answers to. It took me a few days to understand why. Normalcy was her camouflage. If everything felt fine, I'd doubt what I'd seen. Trust doesn't vanish all at once. It erodes quietly, and while it does, it keeps trying to protect the people you trusted. One night, Caleb came over for dinner. That detail alone should have stopped me, but I let it happen. I wanted to see how far this had gone, how naturally they'd slip into whatever this was. He sat at my table like he belonged there, complimented the food, asked me about a client deal, spoke easily, confidently. My wife laughed at his stories in a way that felt familiar. Too familiar. I watched the space between them, how close they stood at the sink, how they passed plates without looking, how their hands brushed and didn't recoil. I excused myself to the bathroom just to see what happened when I wasn't in the room. When I came back, their conversation stopped too cleanly, too practiced. That night, lying awake beside my wife, I felt something settle inside me. Not heartbreak, not rage, certainty. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a lapse. It was a routine. The next week, I changed my schedule without telling anyone. Small shifts, subtle ones. Left earlier, came home later, took a long lunch, canceled a meeting. I wanted to see if they adjusted around me. They did. My wife's errands moved. Caleb's availability shifted. The alignment was almost impressive, like watching gears turn in response to a lever I hadn't known I was pulling before. That was the moment I knew how long this had been happening. You don't build that kind of synchronization overnight. One afternoon I told my wife I'd be working late. I wasn't. I parked a block away and walked back toward my own house, my heartbeat steady in a way that frightened me. The door was unlocked. Inside, I heard voices, not hurried, not hushed, relaxed. I didn't step fully into the room this time. I stood just out of sight and listened. The sound of a chair moving, a laugh, hers, his voice low and confident, saying something I couldn't make out but understood anyway by the tone. This wasn't secrecy, it was ownership. I left without going in. I drove until the urge to confront burned itself out and left behind something colder and more deliberate. By the time I came home at my usual hour, my wife was alone, calm, composed. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. She searched my face, quickly, carefully. I gave her nothing. That night, I sat at the edge of the bed after she fell asleep and stared at the floor, understanding something that shifted the stakes completely. This wasn't just my marriage at risk. Caleb owned half my company. If this exploded the wrong way, emotionally, impulsively, I could lose control of the business I'd spent years building. I could end up fighting a partner who already knew my blind spots, my habits, my pressure points. They weren't just betraying me. They were positioned against me. That realization sharpened everything. I wasn't going to confront them with anger. I wasn't going to react. I was going to prepare. The next morning, I opened a private file on my computer and started writing down dates, times, patterns. Not evidence for court, not yet. Evidence for clarity, for myself. Because once this crossed into daylight, I wasn't going to be confused. I wasn't going to second-guess what I'd seen. And as I typed, one thought kept repeating, steady and unavoidable. If the man sleeping with my wife owned half my company, then this wasn't just betrayal. It was a hostile takeover, and I needed to decide, quietly, carefully, what I was willing to lose to stop it. The hardest part wasn't gathering information. It was pretending I didn't have it. For the next few days, I became the calmest version of myself anyone had ever seen. I showed up early. I smiled in meetings. I let Caleb lead calls. I nodded when he spoke, even when my stomach tightened at the sound of his voice. At home, I asked my wife how her day was and listened like a husband who still believed in normal. It worked. They both relaxed. That's the danger of routine. Once people feel safe, they stop being careful. They start leaving fingerprints. I started with the business side because it was the part I could look at without my emotions getting in the way. We had access logs for the office, not sophisticated, just badge entries tied to times. I'd never cared about them before. Now I printed them and highlighted anything that didn't match what I knew about our schedule. Caleb's badge showed late-night entries on evenings he'd told me he was heading home early. My wife's badge shouldn't have shown anything at all. She didn't officially work there. But there it was, a handful of entries under the guest code we used for deliveries and visitors, entered with her phone number attached. I stared at that detail for a long time, feeling something cold spread through my chest. It wasn't just an affair. It was participation. They weren't sneaking around the edges of my life. They were using my systems. The next piece came from a folder I didn't know existed. I was looking for an old contract on Caleb's computer while he was out, something we both did casually. Shared files, shared passwords, years of trust baked into our workflow. I told myself I was only verifying a client detail. Then I saw it, a subfolder labeled personal. That shouldn't have been on a shared drive. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I could have backed out right then. I could have pretended I never saw it and gone back to living inside a lie that at least felt familiar. Instead, I clicked. Inside were screenshots, not graphic, not explicit, just enough. A selfie of my wife in my kitchen, hair done, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. Another one in the office bathroom mirror, jacket half open, looking like she was waiting for someone to notice her. A photo of a wine glass on our back porch at night. The caption typed underneath, "Finally quiet." My throat tightened, because I knew what he meant by quiet. There was also a document, one page, titled Schedule. I opened it. It was a list of days and times, my days, my meetings, my recurring late calls, my work trips. A column beside them labeled simply, Window. I stared until my eyes went dry. They hadn't been reacting to my schedule. They had been planning around it. This wasn't careless passion. This was operational. I closed the folder, backed out, and sat still for a full minute, listening to the office hum around me like nothing had changed. My hands didn't shake. That scared me. It meant I'd moved beyond shock. I was in the part where decisions get made. That evening, I did something I'd avoided on purpose. I checked my wife's phone. I didn't want to. It felt like crossing into a version of myself I didn't respect, snooping, hunting, begging for proof. But proof wasn't the point anymore. Clarity was. She'd left her phone on the charger in the kitchen while she showered. I picked it up and unlocked it easily because we'd always used the same passcodes and shared everything. Trust had made access simple. The message thread was there, pinned at the top. Caleb. The conversation wasn't romantic. That was the part that hit hardest. It read like planning, like coordination. "He's still on for Thursday?" "Yes." "Late client dinner." "Good." "Same place after?" "Yes." "Don't message until I confirm he left." "Understood." "Understood." No hearts, no pet names, just logistics. Then one message from her, sent earlier that day. "He's been different. If he's onto us, I can't lose everything." Everything. Not me, not us. Everything. I put the phone down exactly where I found it and walked into the living room, breathing slowly. My wife came downstairs a few minutes later, hair damp, wearing a soft sweater she used to wear on nights we stayed in together. "Hey," she said gently. "You okay? You seem quiet." I looked at her and felt something twist. Grief, maybe, or disbelief, or the strange ache of realizing you can love someone and still not recognize them anymore. "Just tired," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "Come to bed early tonight. You need rest." Rest. As if the problem was exhaustion. As if sleep could erase what I'd learned. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark beside her and listened to the steady rhythm of her breathing, realizing my life had been divided into two versions. The one I lived and the one they lived when I wasn't present. By morning I knew I needed help. Real help. Not emotional support. Strategy. I met with a lawyer during lunch under the pretense of reviewing a vendor contract. I didn't tell the full story at first. I asked questions that sounded hypothetical. What happens if a business partner violates trust outside the company? What if personal misconduct affects governance? What if there's a conflict of interest? The lawyer didn't flinch. He listened, then said something that landed like a gavel. "Your business is only as protected as your paperwork," he told me, "and your personal life is only as protected as your boundaries." Boundaries. I left that office with a folder of options and a calm that felt almost unfamiliar. That afternoon, Caleb texted me. "Need to talk tonight. Just you and me. Important." I stared at the screen. For a moment, I wondered if he knew I knew, if he was going to confess, threaten, negotiate. Then my wife texted, seconds later. "Can you work late tonight? Caleb said there's a situation." A situation. 2 messages, 2 angles, 1 coordinated push. They weren't reacting anymore. They were moving, and standing there in my office, holding my phone, I understood something with sharp certainty. Whatever this talk was, it wasn't about honesty. It was about control. I typed back to Caleb. "Sure, my office after 6. Then I opened the private file on my computer and added one more line beneath the dates and logs. Tonight, he's going to try to shape the story. I'm going to end it. Caleb arrived exactly at 6. Not late, not early. Precise in the way people are when they believe timing is leverage. He walked into my office with the same relaxed confidence he'd always carried, jacket off, sleeves rolled, smile ready. The man who'd built a company with me. The man who thought he still knew how this conversation would go. He closed the door behind him. "Everything okay?" he asked, like a courtesy. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit." He did, folding his hands, posture open, cooperative. That was his first mistake. "I'll get straight to it," he said. "There's been some tension lately, between you and me. I wanted to clear the air before it affects the business." The business. I watched him carefully as he spoke. How he chose neutral words, how he avoided specifics. He wasn't here to confess. He was here to manage risk. "I agree," I said. "Clarity is important." Relief flickered across his face. He leaned forward slightly, encouraged. "I think you've been under a lot of pressure," he continued. "Long hours, stress at home, that can distort things. I just want to make sure we're aligned." Aligned. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a printed page. Not the screenshots, not the messages, just the schedule, the one labeled window. I slid it across the desk. His eyes dropped to it. For a second, he didn't react. Then I saw it. The tightening of his jaw, the stillness that replaced ease. He knew exactly what he was looking at. "You want to explain this?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "You went through my files." "I did," I said. "And my house, and my marriage." He leaned back, recalibrating. "This isn't what it looks like." I nodded once. "It never is." He tried another angle. "You don't understand how this started. I understand how it continued," I said, repeatedly, on my schedule. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. "This doesn't have to get messy," he said finally. "We can keep this contained." Contained. That word told me everything. "You mean quiet," I replied. "You mean I absorb it, and you keep half my company." He didn't deny it. "You'd be surprised how often these things resolve that way," he said. "People move on. The business survives." I stood up. That shift changed the room. He looked up at me now, cautious. "You don't own me," I said calmly, "and you don't get to negotiate terms after crossing this line." His voice sharpened. "You're emotional. If you blow this up, you hurt yourself too." "I already did," I said, "by trusting you." I reached for a second folder, this one thinner, cleaner. Legal documents, amendments, exit clauses we'd signed years ago without much thought, assuming we'd never need them. "Do you remember this?" I asked. His eyes widened slightly. "You pushed for that clause," I continued, "in case one of us compromised the company." "That was about fraud," he said quickly. "It's about conflict of interest," I replied. "And this qualifies." The color drained from his face. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "And I am." He stood abruptly. "If you do this, it gets ugly." I met his gaze. "It already is. I'm just making it honest." For a moment I thought he might threaten me, or plead, or finally apologize. He did none of those. He nodded once. "You're making a mistake." I held the door open. "Leave." He walked out without another word. 10 minutes later, my wife called. I didn't answer. She texted, "We need to talk. He said you're upset." Upset. I went home that night to a house that felt like it was waiting for a verdict. She was there, sitting on the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap. When she saw me, she stood. "Please," she said, "before you do anything irreversible." I set my keys down carefully. "You already did," I said. She started crying immediately. Not the quiet kind, the desperate kind. She talked about loneliness, about feeling invisible, about how Caleb understood her. She said it wasn't supposed to happen like this, that it didn't mean what I thought it meant. I listened until she ran out of words. Then I spoke. "You coordinated," I said. "You planned around my absence. You protected the business arrangement before you protected the marriage." She shook her head. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I replied. She reached for me. I stepped back. "This ends tonight," I said. "I've already started the process." Her face crumpled. "You're choosing the company over me." "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing myself." She stood there, stunned, as if she'd believed, right up until this moment, that I would bend, that I would manage it, that I would make it survivable for everyone else. She packed a bag. When the door closed behind her, the house didn't feel empty. It felt resolved, because in the span of one evening, I'd done the thing they didn't expect. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't begged, I hadn't competed, I'd removed access, and that, more than any confrontation, was what finally broke the illusion that this could be controlled. The morning after everything ended, I woke up before the alarm. For a few seconds, I didn't remember why my chest felt so light, and then it hit me. Not like pain, like confirmation, the kind that doesn't ask questions anymore. The house was quiet, not tense, not waiting, just quiet. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the street come alive. People heading to work, someone jogging, a delivery truck idling, life continuing without any awareness that mine had been dismantled and rebuilt overnight. That was the strangest part. The world doesn't pause when your trust collapses. Over the next few weeks, everything became procedural. Lawyers finalized paperwork. The exit clause did exactly what it was designed to do. Caleb fought it at first, threatened delays, hinted at reputational damage, but the documents were airtight. He hadn't expected me to move cleanly. He'd expected emotion. He underestimated preparation. Within a month, he was gone from the company, bought out, removed, quietly erased from the place we'd built together. The office changed immediately, not in energy, clarity. Decisions moved faster. Conversations felt honest again. People stopped tiptoeing around something they hadn't known how to name. Trust, I learned, doesn't disappear when it's broken. It relocates. At home, things were slower. My wife reached out in waves. At first it was apology, then explanation, then desperation disguised as reflection. She talked about therapy, about growth, about how she finally understood what she'd risked. She wanted a conversation. She wanted closure. What she didn't understand was that closure had already happened without her. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Silence was enough. Every unanswered message was a boundary she couldn't negotiate around. When the divorce finalized, it was anticlimactic. No courtroom drama, no raised voices, just signatures and dates. She cried. I didn't. Not because I didn't feel anything, because I'd already felt it. I moved into a smaller place, closer to the office. Clean. Minimal. Nothing sentimental on the walls. I furnished it slowly, choosing things because I liked them, not because they fit a shared vision. The quiet became something I valued. Without the constant hum of suspicion, I started sleeping again, thinking clearly, not replaying conversations, not scanning rooms for signs I'd missed. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been spent managing doubt. Distance gave it back. A few months later, I ran into Caleb by accident, a coffee shop near the office. He looked thinner, tired, like someone who'd discovered too late that leverage isn't loyalty. He noticed me, hesitated, then walked over. "We should talk," he said. I looked at him calmly. We already did. This didn't have to end like this, he replied. I nodded. You're right. It didn't. He waited, expecting more. I picked up my coffee. But it did. I walked away before he could respond. That was the moment I knew it was truly over. Not because I'd won, because I no longer needed to. Later that same week, my wife tried once more. She asked to meet, just to understand. Said she needed to hear it from me. Needed to know if there was anything left. I agreed to meet her. Not for reconciliation, for clarity. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. She looked nervous, hopeful, fragile in a way that felt rehearsed. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I believed her. That didn't change anything. You meant to protect what you were gaining, I replied, even if it cost me. She started crying. I lost everything. I shook my head gently. You lost access. She looked up, confused. You didn't lose your life, I continued. You lost the version where I absorbed the damage so you didn't have to. She asked if I hated her. I thought about it honestly. No, I said, but I don't trust you, and love doesn't survive that. That was the end of the conversation. I didn't feel triumphant walking out. I felt free. Freedom doesn't come from revenge. It comes from refusing to participate in what harms you. Months passed. The company grew. My life simplified. I stopped measuring my worth against someone else's betrayal. I stopped asking how long it had really been going on, because the answer didn't matter anymore. One night, alone in my apartment, I scrolled through my phone and found her contact still there. My thumb hovered for a moment, not with longing, but recognition. That number represented a version of me who mistook trust for safety. I deleted it. Then I set the phone down and sat in the quiet I'd earned. The truth is, betrayal doesn't end when you catch it. It ends when you stop organizing your life around it. I didn't save my marriage. I didn't keep my partnership. But I kept something far more important. My agency. And that was the one thing no one could take. Once I finally decided to hold on to it.